He, a powerful and cynical tycoon, lived in a world of perfection and control. She, a humble and clumsy cleaning lady, but with a pure soul. During an inspection, she slips and falls into his arms. He catches her, feels her fragility, and the genuine guilt in her eyes. That accident makes him see not the disastrous cleaning lady, but a woman with a beauty that transcends. In that instant, the millionaire feels an overwhelming connection and a passion he thought impossible. Watch this story to the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning, as always. Aurora Rory Miller stretched on the thin mattress she shared with her grandmother, Bernadette, careful not to wake her. At 35, she had memorized every creak of their two-room apartment in the Bronx. The smell of reheated coffee mingled with the scent of her grandmother's medications, a morning symphony that had accompanied her for over 10 years. "Good morning, Grandma," she whispered, adjusting the blanket over the frail shoulders of the woman who had raised her after her parents' death. Bernadette mumbled something in her sleep, and Rory smiled. Even at 82, her grandmother still tried to give advice, even in her dreams. Rory put on her navy blue uniform, already faded from countless washes. In the cracked bathroom mirror, she observed her reflection, brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, hazel eyes that she had inherited from her mother, and calloused hands that told the story of a life dedicated to work. She wasn't ugly, she knew that, but she also knew that beauty didn't pay the bills. The bus to Manhattan was packed before it even reached her stop. Rory squeezed in among other workers who, like her, crossed the city every day to clean the dreams of those who could afford to dream. During the 2-hour commute, she thought about the overdue electricity bill and the blood pressure medication that her grandmother would need at the end of the month. Her siblings, Kyle and Madison, were still in school, and she would do anything to ensure they had the education she never could. The Grand Manhattan Hotel stood majestically against the New York City skyline, 30 stories of Italian marble, Austrian crystals, and the most refined luxury that money could buy. Rory always felt small crossing the main lobby, where million-dollar chandeliers illuminated authentic Persian rugs. She knew every inch of that place, every service staircase, every employee elevator that kept her invisible to the guests. 9 miles away, in his duplex apartment on the Upper East Side, Nicholas Caldwell watched the activity of Central Park from his balcony. At 38, he commanded a hotel empire that spanned 3 continents. Caldwell Hotels and Resorts wasn't just a business. It was his legacy, his identity, his gilded cage. Nicholas adjusted the knot of his Hermes tie in front of the full-length mirror. The Italian suit perfectly embraced his athletic body, the result of rigorous workouts with a personal trainer and a disciplined routine that allowed no excesses. His green eyes, inherited from his Italian grandmother, reflected the calculated coldness of someone who had learned early that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. The phone vibrated. His secretary, Monica, confirmed the surprise inspection at the Grand Manhattan Hotel. Nicholas smiled without humor. These unexpected visits always revealed the small flaws that his managers tried to hide. And he didn't tolerate imperfection. During the drive in his armored Mercedes-Benz, Nicholas mentally reviewed the hotel's numbers: 93% occupancy, revenue above target, but some complaints about cleanliness on the upper floors. Details that for others would be insignificant, but that for him represented cracks in the reputation he had taken years to build. The arranged marriage with Isabella Montgomery weighed on his mind. The senator's daughter would bring valuable political connections, but Nicholas knew she saw him only as a social stepping stone. Just like Veronica, his ex-fiancée, who had left him for a younger entrepreneur after discovering that he didn't intend to finance her acting career. The women who surrounded him saw only his money, never the man who existed behind the fortune. At the hotel, Rory finished cleaning the 23rd floor when she received a call from her supervisor. Mr. Caldwell was in the building doing a surprise inspection. All employees should redouble their attention. Rory felt her stomach clench. In 5 years working there, she had only seen him from afar, but she knew his reputation: demanding, relentless, a man who fired people for details that others wouldn't even notice. She grabbed her cleaning cart and headed for the 25th floor, her heart beating faster than normal. The floor had been waxed the night before and was still slippery. Rory always took extra care on those days, but the rush and nervousness made her quicken her pace. Nicholas emerged from the executive elevator at the exact moment that Rory turned the corner of the hallway, pushing the heavy cleaning cart. The treacherous floor caused her to lose her balance, and the cart came to life, sliding towards the businessman. Time seemed to stop. Rory tried to grab onto something, anything, but ended up tripping over her own feet. Nicholas, with sharp reflexes, dropped his briefcase and instinctively extended his arms. The impact was both gentle and devastating. Rory found herself nestled against Nicholas's muscular chest, her face inches from his, able to smell the expensive cologne he wore mixed with something more personal, more intimate. His green eyes studied her with an intensity that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with the shock. Nicholas held her firmly, feeling her delicate body trembling slightly. He expected to see malice, interest, the calculating, anticipation he knew so well. Instead, he found hazel eyes full of genuine panic, cheeks flushed with authentic shame, and a vulnerability so pure that it hit him like a punch to the gut. For an infinite moment, they looked at each other in absolute silence. Rory saw her dismissal reflected in those green eyes, while Nicholas saw something he thought no longer existed: sincerity without masks. The cart, forgotten, continued its trajectory and collided gently against the wall, making a noise that broke the spell of the moment. Ni? Rory remained motionless for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, still nestled against Nicholas's chest. When she finally realized the situation, she pulled away sharply, as if she had touched fire. I'm so sorry, Mr. Caldwell. It was an accident, I swear." The words tumbled out, mixed with her accelerated breathing. "I know I have no excuse, but the floor was slippery and—" Nicholas observed her carefully. He expected to see the calculated embarrassment he knew so well, the false humility, followed by a seductive smile and a disguised pickup line. Instead, he found genuine panic, real shame, and a vulnerability so authentic that it left him momentarily speechless. "Are you hurt?" he asked, noticing how her hands trembled slightly. Rory blinked, surprised by the question. "Me? No, sir, but what about you? Did I hurt you? Did I ruin your suit?" She looked at the Italian suit as if it were a work of art she had desecrated. The genuine concern in her voice did something strange to Nicholas's chest. How long had it been since someone had worried about his well-being without ulterior motives? "I'm fine," he said softly, helping her to stand up completely. Their fingers touched briefly, and they both felt an electric spark that neither knew how to interpret. Rory took a few steps back, creating a safe distance. "I'll get another employee to finish this floor. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you allow it, I would like to continue working in the other sections." "Why did you assume you're fired?" The question came out more intimate than Nicholas intended. She stared at him in disbelief. Because I'm just a cleaning lady who knocked over the hotel owner. People like me don't survive accidents. Like this." "People like you?" Nicholas tilted his head, genuinely curious. Rory gestured to herself as if the answer were obvious. "Poor, unimportant, easily replaceable." Each word came out with a resignation that cut Nicholas more deeply than she imagined. What if I said you're not easily replaceable? The hallway went silent. Rory studied him as if he were an impossible enigma to decipher. Nicholas Caldwell, the ruthless tycoon who fired managers for late reports, was standing there talking to her as if she were a person who mattered. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Nicholas didn't have a rational answer. He only knew that there was something about Rory that intrigued him deeply. The way she had worried about him before herself, how she had taken the blame without trying to manipulate the situation, how she treated her own dignity with such care, even believing she was about to lose it. "Maybe because accidents sometimes show us things we needed to see," he replied, surprised by his own honesty. Before Rory could answer, voices echoed in the hallway. Managers approached, probably alerted by the noise of the cart. Nicholas saw the panic return to her eyes, the social reality of the situation hitting her like a cold wave. "Mr. Caldwell," the voice of Mark, the general manager, echoed through the hallway. "Is everything all right? We heard a noise." Nicholas looked at Rory, who had already moved away, and assumed a submissive posture, her eyes fixed on the floor. The transformation was instantaneous and devastating for him. The woman who seconds ago was talking to him as an equal had disappeared, replaced by the invisible employee that the world expected her to be. "Everything's fine," said Nicholas with authority, "but I need to talk to you about the safety protocols on the waxed floors." He looked at Rory one last time. "And I want employee Rory Miller to report to my office tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Rory looked up, surprised and terrified at the same time. Mark frowned. He had never seen the boss ask to speak personally with a cleaning employee. Nicholas walked away with the managers, but not before casting one last glance at Rory. She remained there, alone in the hallway, her heart racing and 1,000 questions multiplying in her mind. She didn't know if that meeting meant salvation or condemnation, but one thing was certain: her life had just taken a completely unexpected turn. The meeting in the office the next morning was different from what Rory expected. Nicholas didn't fire her. Instead, he offered her a special position, to take care exclusively of his executive office and the presidential suite when he was at the hotel. The salary was 3 times higher than her current one. "Why me?" Rory had asked, suspicious of the inexplicable generosity. "Because I need someone I can trust," was his enigmatic reply. Now, 2 weeks later, Rory had settled into a strange and intimate routine. She arrived on the 28th floor at 6 in the morning, when Nicholas was already in meetings and meticulously organized his personal space. She knew his habits, how he always left 3 pens aligned on the desk, how he folded the newspapers into a perfect pile, how his coffee cooled untouched when he was worried about something. Nicholas, in turn, began to adjust his schedules to cross paths with her. He arrived earlier at the office, made up excuses to return during the day. He told himself it was professional supervision, but the truth was that Rory's presence had become a silent necessity. "Have you always been so organized?" he asked one afternoon, finding her meticulously rearranging his private library. Rory smiled shyly. "My grandmother always said that an organized house is an organized mind. She taught me that taking care of other people's things is a way of showing respect." "And you? Who takes care of you?" The question caught Rory off guard. She paused, a business history book in her hands. "I take care of myself. It's always been that way." Nicholas approached, noticing how she held the book with reverential care. "Do you like to read?" "When I can." She put the book back on the shelf. "My mom used to say that books were passports to worlds we might never know personally. Was your mom a teacher?" Rory hesitated, her fingers tracing the spine of the book. "She wanted to be. She got pregnant with me at 17 and the dreams were left for later. Later never came." There was something in her voice, a carefully guarded sadness that made Nicholas want to know more. "And your father?" Rory's face closed instantly. "He's not part of the story." Nicholas recognized the tone. It was the same one he used when they wanted to know about his own family. "Painful stories have a way of haunting us," he said softly. Rory looked at him in surprise. There was something in his voice, an understanding that went beyond polite sympathy. "Do you also have stories you'd rather not tell?" Nicholas walked to the window, observing the movement of the city below. "My father was a demanding man. He believed that love was a weakness that businessmen couldn't afford to have. He taught me that control was more important than affection, success more valuable than happiness. And your mother?" A muscle tensed in Nicholas's jaw. "She tried to protect me from him when I was a child. She paid dearly for it." He turned to Rory, his green eyes laden with dark memories. "He had her committed to a mental institution when I was 12 years old. Said she was emotionally unstable. I never saw her again." Rory felt her heart clench. The pain in his voice echoed her own. "I'm so sorry." "She used to read to me," continued Nicholas, his voice lower. "Adventure stories of brave people who faced giants. After she was gone, my father burned all her books, said they were things for weak women." The silence that followed was charged with mutual understanding. Two emotional orphans, each in their own way, recognizing a familiar pain in the other. "Is that why you don't trust people?" Rory asked softly. Nicholas observed her, impressed by her perception. "Maybe. It's easier to control than to trust. Control doesn't disappoint us." "But it doesn't warm us either," Rory replied, her words carrying a wisdom born of experience. They looked at each other across the office, an invisible current of understanding flowing between them. Nicholas took a step towards her, then stopped, remembering the invisible but real barriers that separated them. "Rory," he said, his voice husky, "you're not just an employee to me." She swallowed hard, feeling the world tilt beneath her feet. "Mr. Nicholas." "Nicholas. Just Nicholas." "Nicholas," she repeated, tasting the name without the formal titles. "This is dangerous. For both of us. I know." He took one more step closer. "But for the first time in years, I don't care about what's safe. I care about what's real." Rory felt tears burning in her eyes. "People like us don't have happy endings. You know that. Maybe it's time we rewrite the rules." Before she could answer, Nicholas's phone rang. It was Mark, reminding him of the meeting with the shareholders. Reality hit them like a bucket of cold water. Nicholas answered the call, but his eyes remained on Rory. "I'll be down in 5 minutes," he said, hanging up. Rory had already backed away, composing herself. "I'll finish here and leave through the service elevator." "Rory, it's better this way," she said quickly. "It's better to keep up appearances." But as she passed him towards the door, Nicholas gently held her wrist. "This isn't over," he whispered, "no matter how much we try to pretend it is." Rory looked at his fingers on her wrist, feeling her skin burn where he touched. "Some stories are too beautiful to be true," she murmured, gently freeing herself and leaving the room. Nicholas was left alone, but her soft perfume remained in the air, as well as the certainty that he had found something he didn't know he was looking for, and that perhaps, for the first time in his life, it was worth fighting for something beyond control. The storm began in the early hours of Thursday, turning New York City into a maze of flooded streets and paralyzed traffic. Rory arrived at the hotel, soaking wet, 2 hours late, after walking miles when the buses stopped running. Her soaked sneakers made noise with every step through the hallway of the 28th floor. Nicholas was in his office, but not alone. Through the partially open door, Rory heard tense voices. An emergency meeting had been called due to the storm affecting 3 of his hotels in the city. She decided to start with the presidential suite, leaving the office for later. It was upon entering the suite that Rory found something that made her stop in her tracks. On the coffee table, partially covered by documents, were scattered white pills and small plastic sachets. Her heart skipped a beat. Drugs in the room of the man who was slowly winning her heart. For a moment, she was paralyzed, the world collapsing around her. All the stories she had heard about powerful men and their dark addictions came back to her mind. Was Nicholas just another one? Had she been too naive to see the signs? With trembling hands, Rory began to back away when she heard quick footsteps in the hallway. Nicholas entered the suite, visibly agitated, his cell phone glued to his ear. "No, it can't wait until tomorrow. If we don't get the medication today, the situation will..." He stopped abruptly upon seeing Rory there, the phone falling from his hand. The silence between them was deafening. Rory looked at the sachets on the table, then at Nicholas, her eyes filled with disappointment and fear. Nicholas followed her gaze and immediately understood the misunderstanding. "Rory, it's not what you're thinking. You don't have to explain anything," she said, her voice trembling. "It's none of my business. I just need to finish the cleaning." "Look at me," said Nicholas, desperate. "Please just look at me." Reluctantly, Rory raised her eyes. Instead of the guilt or aggression she expected to see, she found something that looked like pure panic. Nicholas walked slowly to the table and picked up one of the sachets. "This is insulin," he said, his voice breaking. "And these," he pointed to the pills, "are heart medication." Rory frowned, confused. "There's a family trapped in the hotel near Coney Island," continued Nicholas, his words tumbling out. "The father is diabetic. The little daughter has heart problems. With the storm, they ran out of medication and can't get out to buy it. The pharmacies in the area are closed because of the flood." The truth began to form in Rory's mind, but she was still hesitant. "I was arranging a helicopter to take the medication to them," continued Nicholas. "My pilot said the conditions are dangerous, but a child could die if she doesn't receive the medication in the next few hours." Rory looked again at the medication, then at Nicholas's face. There was no lie there, just genuine despair. "Why would you do that?" she asked softly. Nicholas sat down heavily on the sofa, running his hands through his hair. "Because I know what it's like to be a helpless child. I know what it's like to have someone who should protect you and can't." His voice was a rough whisper. "My mother died in a clinic because no one cared enough to help. I'm not going to let that happen to another child, not while I can do something about it." The confession hit Rory like a lightning bolt. All her defenses crumbled at the sight of the raw vulnerability in his eyes. This was the real Nicholas, not the ruthless tycoon, but a man carrying the pain of a child who couldn't save his own mother. Without thinking, Rory approached and knelt before him. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I should have trusted you." Nicholas looked at her, surprised by the intimate proximity. "Why would you? You barely know me." "But I do," Rory replied, her hands lightly touching his. "I know the man who asks if I'm okay after an accident, who offers a better job without asking for anything in return, who cares about a family of strangers during a storm." The storm outside intensified, as if the sky mirrored the emotional turbulence between them. Nicholas looked at Rory's hands. On his, so small, so calloused from work, but so capable of offering comfort. "The helicopter won't be able to fly," he said, defeated. "And I don't know how to get those medications to them." Rory thought quickly. "What if we go by car? I know some shortcuts, roads that might not be flooded." "It's too dangerous. And you don't have to..." "Yes, I do," she interrupted firmly. If a child needs help, I need to help. That's how I was raised. Nicholas studied her for a long moment. You would do that? Risk yourself for people you don't even know? I would do it for you, Rory replied, the words coming out before she could censor them. The air between them was charged with electricity. Nicholas raised one of his hands and gently touched Rory's face, drying a tear that she hadn't even realized she had shed. Rory, he murmured, his thumb tracing her cheek. I know it's impossible, she whispered, leaning slightly against his. Touch, I know I shouldn't feel this way about you. What if I told you I feel the same way? They were so close that Rory could feel his breath against her skin. I'd say we're both crazy. Then let's be crazy together, said Nicholas, his lips almost touching hers. The moment was interrupted by a crash of thunder that made the windows tremble. Reality brought them back. There was a family waiting for help. Let's go, said Rory, getting up and extending her hand to him. Let's save that child. And then... She hesitated. Then we'll talk about this craziness, completed Nicholas, taking her hand. As they prepared to face the storm together, they both knew there was no turning back. Whatever happened that night would change everything between them. And for the first time in their lives, they were willing to risk everything for something that was worth more than safety or control. They were willing to risk everything for love. More. The drive to Coney Island through the flooded streets lasted 3 agonizing hours. Nicholas drove the armored SUV while Rory navigated the alternate routes she had known since childhood. They talked throughout the journey about fears, abandoned dreams, scars that shaped who they became. When they finally delivered the medications to the desperate family, they saw a 6-year-old child saved by their shared courage. The return happened in silence, loaded with meaning. The storm had ceased, leaving the streets deserted and shining under the light of the street lamps. In the hotel parking lot, Nicholas turned off the engine, but neither of them made a move to leave. Thank you, he said finally, not just for the medications, for reminding me of who I used to be before I built all these walls. Rory turned to him in the seat. And thank you for showing me that not all powerful men are like my father. The confession escaped before she could contain it. Nicholas frowned. Your father? Rory closed her eyes, fighting against memories she preferred to keep buried. He was the manager of a small bank. For our neighborhood, he was an important man. He wore a suit, had a car, spoke nicely. Her voice became bitter. But at home, he hit my mother when he drank. He said she was too stupid to understand men's business. One day, she threatened to report him for some irregularities she discovered in his bank. The following week, she died in an accident. Nicholas felt his blood run cold. You think I was 15 years old. No one would believe a teenager against a respected man. He disappeared soon after the funeral, taking what was left of her savings. Rory opened her eyes, facing Nicholas. I learned that men with power do what they want, and people like me just survive or disappear. The raw vulnerability in those words made Nicholas want to protect her from the entire world. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her face. I would never hurt you, he said intensely. Never. I know, Rory whispered, covering his hand with hers. That's why what I'm feeling is so dangerous. They leaned towards each other slowly, like irresistible magnets. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, loaded with years of loneliness and pain, that finally found solace. Then it deepened, urgent, desperate, as if they wanted to heal each other's wounds through that contact. When they parted breathless, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he murmured. I know, Rory replied, and it scares me. Me too. They went up to the presidential suite together. Not to make love. They both knew they weren't ready to completely cross that line, but to be close. to process the intensity of what had happened. Rory fell asleep on the sofa, wrapped in Nicholas's jacket. He watched her sleep until dawn, memorizing every feature, every soft breath. That's how Isabella Montgomery found them. Nicholas's arranged fiancée had a key to the suite, a gift he had given months before, when he still believed he could love for convenience. Isabella entered without knocking at 7 in the morning, carrying coffee and croissants, planning a romantic surprise to discuss the details of the wedding. What she found was Nicholas asleep in the armchair, still wearing the crumpled clothes from the night before, and an unknown woman sleeping on the sofa, wrapped in his jacket. The sound of the tray falling to the floor woke Rory with a start. She sat up confused, still half asleep, and saw a blonde woman elegantly dressed looking at her with an expression of shock and fury. Nicholas woke up immediately. "Isabella, I can explain." "Explain." Her voice was dangerously controlled. "Explain why I find my future husband sleeping with this?" She gestured disdainfully at Rory, who had gotten up and was trying to discreetly return the jacket to Nicholas. "She's not this," said Nicholas, his voice carrying a tone of warning. "And you shouldn't be here." Isabella laughed bitterly. "Oh, but I should be, especially considering that our engagement will be officially announced in Town & Country magazine next week." Her eyes narrowed as she studied Rory. "You look familiar. You work here, don't you? A cleaning lady?" Rory felt her face burn with humiliation, but she maintained her dignity. "Excuse me," she murmured, heading for the door. "Rory, wait," said Nicholas, but Isabella interrupted him. "Rory? What a common name." Isabella's smile was glacial. "Let me guess, the story, darling. The rich boss paid attention to you, and you thought you were special, that he would leave everything for a cleaning lady." "Enough, Isabella," said Nicholas sternly. But Isabella was just getting started. "Do you know how much his fortune is? Worth? $3 billion. Do you know how much my father is worth to his business? Another $2 billion in political connections. And you, what are you worth?" The words hit Rory like physical slaps, but it was Nicholas's silence that hurt her the most. He didn't defend her, didn't deny the implications. "Isabella, let's talk in private," said Nicholas finally. "Oh no," replied Isabella, her tone becoming dangerously sweet. "I think our new friend needs to understand a few things. Needs to know, for example, that there are some very interesting photos of you two last night. My driver is quite observant." Nicholas's blood ran cold. "What photos?" "You in the parking lot, you kissing, you going into the suite together." Isabella examined her nails with false indifference. "I imagine what would happen if those photos reached the press. The scandal would be devastating for both of you." Rory felt nauseous. "What do you want?" "Smart. I like that." Isabella approached her like a predator. "I want you to disappear. Completely. Get out of the hotel. Get out of the city. Get out of his life. In exchange, the photos will never see the light of day. And if I refuse," Isabella's smile became cruel, "then the whole city will know that Nicholas Caldwell is cheating on his fiancée with the cleaning lady. His reputation will be destroyed, his businesses affected, and as for you..." Isabella shrugged. "A poor woman who seduces her boss? You'll never get a decent job anywhere again. Not to mention what will happen to your dear grandmother and your little siblings when the newspapers find out where you live." Rory paled. The threat to her family cut deeper than any personal insult. "You have 24 hours, said Isabella, walking towards the door. "And Nicholas, darling, I hope this indiscretion was worth it, because it's going to cost everyone involved a lot." After she left, the silence in the suite was suffocating. Rory and Nicholas looked at each other across the abyss that had suddenly opened between them. "Rory," began Nicholas, but she shook her head. "She's right," said Rory, her voice breaking. "I was naive. People like us really don't have happy endings. That's not true, isn't it?" Rory turned to him, tears running down her face. "Then tell me, Nicholas, tell me you're going to face the scandal, that you're going to risk your billions, your company, everything for a disastrous cleaning lady." Nicholas's silence was his answer. Rory nodded, as if she had expected exactly that. "That's what I thought." She headed for the door, stopping only to look at him one last time. "Thank you for reminding me, even if just for one night, what it's like to be seen, what it's like to be important to someone." And then she was gone, leaving Nicholas alone with the consequences of a love that was born as an accident and died as an impossibility. Rory spent the next 3 days like a ghost in her grandmother's apartment. The hours dragged between despair and a dull ache that seemed to consume her from within. She didn't leave her room, didn't eat, didn't speak. Bernadette tried to comfort her, but Rory had completely shut down. On the morning of the 3rd day, the photos hit the newsstands. The first call came from Kyle in tears. "Rory, there are pictures of you in the newspapers, intimate pictures. What have you done?" Rory ran to the corner and bought 3 different tabloids. The images were devastating. Her and Nicholas kissing in the parking lot during the storm, entering the suite together, embracing on the sofa. The quality was professional, the angles calculated for maximum impact. The headlines were cruel. "The cleaning lady and the billionaire. Scandal shakes Caldwell empire. She planned it all." But it was the main article that completely destroyed her. A source close to revealed intimate details impossible to know. How Rory had seduced Nicholas, taking advantage of his vulnerability after his recent divorce. How she had deliberately provoked the accident in the hallway. How she used her apparent innocence to manipulate him. There were even false quotes attributed to her. "I always knew he would be interested in someone different. A man like him needs a woman who makes him feel superior." The phone didn't stop ringing. Journalists, onlookers, some neighbors feigning concern but clearly looking for gossip. Rory disconnected the phone, but that didn't stop them from gathering at her door. "Rory! Rory!" shouted the reporters. "Is it true that you plan to seduce Mr. Caldwell? How much did he pay for your silence?" Bernadette, despite her advanced age, stood at the door like a lioness protecting her cub. "Get out of here. My granddaughter is an honest girl. You have no right to disturb her like this." But her grandmother's words were lost in the chaos. The neighbors came to the windows, some in solidarity, others clearly judging. Rory heard fragments of conversations. "I always thought she was too quiet. Who would have thought? Poor old Bernadette, the shame she must be going through." The worst came when Madison called, also crying. "Rory, at school they're saying that you sold yourself to him. The boys are making horrible jokes. I can't take it anymore." Rory broke down. Not for herself, but for the family she loved so much, and who were now paying the price for her audacity in loving someone above her social standing. On the other side of the city, Nicholas faced his own war. The board of shareholders had met in emergency session. Isabella had arrived accompanied by her father, Senator Montgomery, and a battalion of lawyers. "Nicholas, you need to understand the gravity of the situation," said the senator, his voice laden with political authority. "This situation cannot continue. It's affecting not only your reputation, but it's jeopardizing our future agreements." "What agreements?" asked Nicholas, although he knew the answer. "The concession of the land for the new casino in Atlantic City depends on political approval. My influence would guarantee that approval, but I can't be associated with a scandal of this magnitude." Isabella, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Nicholas, I'm willing to forget this phase. We can announce our engagement today, smother all this noise. In 6 months, no one will remember this story." And if I refuse? Isabella's smile was glacial. Then the next photos that leak will be even more compromising. And it won't just be his reputation at stake. It will be hers too. I imagine what further exposure would do to such a simple family. The veiled threat made Nicholas's blood boil, but before he could respond, his assistant rushed into the room urgently. "Sir, there's a crowd of journalists in front of Miss Miller's house. The situation is getting ugly. The police had to be called." The image of Rory being harassed by ravenous reporters made Nicholas stand up abruptly. "I need to get there." "Sir, I don't recommend it," said Mark, nervously. "Your presence there would only make things worse." "He's right," said Isabella with false concern. "You showing up there now would be like throwing gasoline on the fire. It would be the end of any possibility of resolving this discreetly." Nicholas looked out the window, torn between the desperation to protect Rory and the awareness that his presence might actually worsen the situation for her. It was at that moment that he received a message that made him feel like he had been shot in the chest. It was from Rory. "Nicholas, I can't take this anymore. I can't see my family suffering because of me. I'm leaving New York tonight. Please don't look for me. What we felt was real, but the world isn't ready to accept it. Maybe in another life we'll have a chance. Take care, Rory." When Nicholas tried to call her, the phone was off. When he sent messages, they weren't delivered. She had completely cut off communication. That night, a devastated Rory boarded a bus to Boston with only a small suitcase and a broken heart. She left a letter for Bernadette, promising to send money as soon as she got a job, begging her grandmother to take care of Kyle and Madison. Nicholas spent the whole night driving through the streets of New York, desperately looking for her. When he finally arrived at her apartment, he found only her grandmother in tears and a neighborhood still agitated by the remnants of the media circus. "Where did she go?" he pleaded with Bernadette. The old lady studied him for a long moment, seeing the genuine pain in his eyes. "I don't know, son. She didn't want to tell me, so that no one could force her to speak. She only said that it was better this way." Nicholas knelt before the old lady's chair, a powerful man reduced to utter despair. "I love her. I really love her." "I know, son," said Bernadette, gently stroking his hair. "But sometimes love isn't enough to conquer the world, and you two live in very different worlds." When Nicholas left that humble apartment, he knew he had lost the only thing that really mattered in his life, and the worst thing was that he had no idea how to find her, or if she would ever forgive him for not being strong enough to protect her from the cruelty of the world they inhabited. The storm that had united their destinies had turned into the hurricane that separated them forever. Or at least, that's what they both believed in that moment of absolute despair. 3 weeks had passed since Rory had disappeared from their lives. 3 weeks during which Nicholas had transformed into a shadow of himself. The company continued to function out of inertia, but everyone noticed how the CEO seemed to have lost his soul. Nicholas had officially accepted the engagement with Isabella at a cold and formal press conference. The press celebrated the union of two empires, but anyone paying attention would notice that the groom's eyes seemed dead. In Boston, Rory worked as a night cleaner in a commercial building. It was a lonely and poorly paid job, but at least it gave her the invisibility she needed so much. During the day, she tried to sleep in a small rented room in a rundown boarding house, but sleep rarely came. The images of Nicholas, the pain in his eyes the last time they saw each other, haunted her constantly. She had managed to send some money to Bernadette, but she knew it wasn't enough to cover her grandmother's medications and her siblings' studies. Guilt consumed her as much as longing. It was on one of those sleepless nights that she received an unexpected visit. Someone knocked on the door of her room at 2 a.m. Rory opened it hesitantly, finding a middle-aged man, well-dressed, whom she vaguely recognized. "Miss Rory, My name is Robert Silver. I used to be Mr. Nicholas's personal assistant. Used to be? I was fired last week, officially for cost-cutting, but we both know what the real reason was. Robert entered when she gestured, his eyes scanning the miserable room. I need to tell you some things I've discovered, things that will shock you. Rory poured the weak coffee she had prepared. What did you discover? Robert pulled a thick envelope from his jacket. The photos that leaked weren't taken by curious people or opportunistic paparazzi. They were commissioned. What do you mean? Isabella Montgomery hired a private investigator to follow Nicholas for months. She knew about you long before the scandal broke. In fact, she orchestrated everything. Rory felt the world spin. Are you saying that it was all planned? Isabella found out about your relationship through employees she bribed at the hotel. She waited for the right moment and then set up the whole situation to force a definitive separation. Robert opened the envelope, spreading documents on the precarious table. There were payment receipts for the detective, transcribed phone conversations, emails between Isabella and her allies in the press. But there's more, continued Robert. Isabella didn't act alone. Senator Montgomery, her father, has a direct interest in the merger with Nicholas's company. There are million-dollar contracts at stake, government concessions that depend on this union. Rory read the documents with growing horror. And Nicholas? Does he know any of this? He has no idea. He genuinely believes it was an accidental leak and that he's protecting you by accepting the engagement. Robert leaned forward. Miss Rory, he's dying inside. I saw that man build an empire, face impossible crises, but I've never seen him so destroyed. Why are you telling me this? Because I worked for him for 10 years. Because I saw how he changed after he met you. For the first time in years, he was genuinely happy. And because I can't see such a great injustice being perpetuated. Rory stood up and walked to the small window that overlooked the busy street. What good does it do to know this now? The damage is already done. He's going to marry her in a few months, and you're going to keep running for the rest of your life? The question cut deep. Rory turned to Robert. What do you suggest? I do? That I show up at his door with these documents. He has a company to protect, a reputation, responsibilities that go far beyond his feelings. I suggest you fight for what you love, said Robert firmly. That you stop passively accepting the destiny that others have written for you. Robert left the documents with her and departed, but his words echoed throughout the night in Rory's mind. For the first time since she had fled New York, she felt something other than resignation growing inside her. Anger. Anger at having been manipulated. Anger at Nicholas being deceived. Anger at having allowed people like Isabella to decide her fate without fighting. In New York, Nicholas was in his penthouse alone, looking at the city lights. Isabella had gone to a party with her friends, and he had taken advantage of her absence to try to process the destruction his life had become. The phone rang. It was Mark, nervous as always lately. Sir, there's a situation. Miss Miller's grandmother's in the hospital. She fell ill this afternoon. Nicholas felt his heart race. How is she? Stable, but the doctors say she needs special care. The problem is, the family can't afford the proper treatment. Without hesitation, Nicholas said, transfer her to New York Presbyterian Hospital immediately. Private room, the best doctors, and I want it to be discreet. Sir, if Isabella finds out, Isabella won't find out. And Mark, try to find out where Rory is. Her grandmother needs her now. Meanwhile, in Boston, Rory had also received the call about her grandmother's hospitalization. Her world collapsed again. She had abandoned the most important person in her life just when Bernadette needed her most. Without thinking twice, Rory took the first bus back to New York. It didn't matter the scandal. It didn't matter what might happen to her. Bernadette needed her granddaughter, and Rory wouldn't fail her again. But what Rory didn't know was that her return to New York happened exactly at the moment when other plans were being put into motion. Robert had planted seeds of doubt in other people who knew the truth, and Isabella, too confident in her victory, was about to make a mistake that would reveal the full extent of her manipulation. The storm that had separated Rory and Nicholas was about to give way to another, one that would finally bring the truth to light, no matter how many reputations were destroyed in the process. Rory arrived at New York Presbyterian Hospital in the early hours of Friday morning, exhausted from the trip and desperate for news of her grandmother. When she discovered that Bernadette was admitted to the best room in the hospital with the best doctors, she knew immediately who had arranged everything. "How is she?" she asked Dr. Campbell, who was waiting for her. "Stable. It was a cardiac episode, but she responded well to the treatment. The gentleman who authorized the admission asked to be notified as soon as you arrived." Rory shook her head. "I don't want to bother him. I just want to see my grandmother." Bernadette was sleeping when Rory entered the room. She looked so fragile, connected to the machines, but she was breathing peacefully. Rory held her hand and finally allowed the tears that had been dammed up for weeks to flow freely. "Forgive your silly granddaughter, Grandma," she whispered. "I ran away when I should have stayed to take care of you. You did what you thought was best at the time," said a familiar voice behind her. Rory turned, finding Nicholas at the door of the room. He was different, thinner, with deep circles under his eyes, but his eyes lit up when he saw her as if she were a miracle. "Nicholas," her voice was a choked whisper. "Can I come in?" Rory nodded, unable to speak. Nicholas approached slowly, as if she might disappear at any moment. "How did you know I was here?" "Mark told me when you arrived. Rory, He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "God, how I missed you." "You're going to get married," she said, forcing the words out. "I saw it in the newspapers." "I'm going to call off the wedding." Rory's eyes widened. "What?" "I'm going to call everything off, today." Nicholas knelt next to her chair, taking her free hands. "Rory, I've discovered some things in the last few weeks. Things about how our story leaked, about who was behind everything." "I've discovered them too," said Rory, remembering the documents that Robert had left with her. "Isabella orchestrated everything." "You knew?" "Robert contacted me in Boston. He showed me the evidence." Rory studied his face. "Why are you going to call off the wedding, your company, the contracts?" "To hell with the company," said Nicholas with a vehemence that surprised her. "To hell with the contracts. I lost 3 weeks of my life away from you, and they were the 3 most miserable weeks I've ever lived. I'm not going to waste another day pretending to love someone else when my heart belongs to you." "Nicholas, people will talk. The scandal, let them talk. This time I'll tell our true story. Let the whole world know that Nicholas Caldwell is hopelessly in love with Aurora Miller, and that anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell." Rory laughed through her tears. "You just swore. I'll swear much worse if I have to." He leaned in, touching her face. "Rory, marry me." "What?" she almost shouted, waking Bernadette. "Girl, what's all the noise?" murmured her grandmother, opening her eyes slowly. When she saw Nicholas kneeling next to Rory, a smile spread across her wrinkled face. "Ah, so that's it. It's about time. You two stopped with this nonsense." Bernadette turned to Nicholas. "And you, handsome boy, what are you waiting for to ask properly?" Nicholas laughed, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. "I was trying, Mrs. Miller, but your granddaughter is stubborn." Rory looked incredulously at the diamond ring. "You had this prepared." "I bought it the day after the storm, when I knew I was in love with you. I was waiting for the right moment." He took her hand. "Aurora Miller, will you marry me and make me the happiest man in the world?" "But Isabella." "I've already taken care of Isabella." "What do you mean?" Nicholas smiled with a satisfaction she hadn't seen in weeks. Let's just say that Robert wasn't the only one who discovered some interesting things. When I confronted Isabella with the evidence of her manipulation, she tried to blackmail me, saying she would destroy you if I called off the engagement. That's when I realized what kind of person she really is, and I recorded the entire conversation, including the part where she confessed to orchestrating the scandal and threatened to destroy you and your family if I didn't marry her. Nicholas's eyes flashed dangerously. Interesting how the truth changes everything, isn't it? Rory shook, her head still processing. Are you sure about all of this? About what this is going to mean for us? I'm sure that I love you. I'm sure that I don't want to live a single day without you. And I'm sure that I don't care about anything else besides that. Answer quickly, girl, intervened Bernadette impatiently. This boy has been kneeling for 10 minutes, and in my time that was considered rude to the suitor. Rory looked at Nicholas, the powerful man who had given up everything for her, who was willing to face the whole world for their love. She looked at her grandmother, who was watching her with eyes full of love and approval. And finally, she looked at her own heart, which had stopped running the first time she had felt truly at home. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I accept. The kiss that followed was interrupted by applause coming from the door of the room. Kyle and Madison were there, brought by Mark, with tears of joy in their eyes. Finally, shouted Madison, running to hug her sister. I knew you guys would end up together, said Kyle, hugging Nicholas as if he had been part of the family for years. 2 weeks later, Nicholas organized a press conference that would be remembered for years in front of dozens of journalists and television cameras. He not only publicly called off the engagement with Isabella, but revealed the whole truth about the manipulation, presenting the evidence he had collected. True love doesn't hide, he said, holding Rory's hand in front of the cameras, and I refuse to live a lie when I can live a beautiful truth alongside the woman I love. The media reaction was explosive, but this time in their favor. The story of Rory and Nicholas became a modern fairy tale, the billionaire who chose true love over social convenience. Isabella tried to sue Nicholas for defamation, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. She ended up moving to Miami, where she tried to rebuild her reputation away from the spotlight. 6 months later, Rory walked towards the altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral, wearing a simple but elegant wedding dress, accompanied by Bernadette in a wheelchair adorned with flowers. Nicholas waited for her at the altar, and when their eyes met, they both knew they had found their forever. Who would have thought, whispered Rory as they exchanged rings, that an accident could change our lives so much? It wasn't an accident, replied Nicholas, kissing her hand. It was destiny. And as they left the church under a shower of rose petals and camera flashes, this time celebratory, Rory knew that her grandmother was right. Sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, disguised as accidents that are actually miracles waiting to happen. Nicholas's hotel empire not only survived the scandal, but thrived under the new philosophy that Rory brought to his life. That true success is not measured only in money, but in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. Together, they transformed several hotels in the chain into professional training centers for young people from underserved communities, offering opportunities for people like Rory had been once. And every time they visited the Grand Manhattan Hotel, they passed by the 25th floor and laughed, remembering how a waxed floor and an out-of-control cleaning cart had been the real cupids of their love story. Because sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in small accidents that change everything forever.